All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is John LeBaron. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Pattern, and we're thrilled to be able to bring to you some really great insights and knowledge heading into 2023. We're already a month through this year. It's bonkers. I know we'll have a handful of folks joining as they hop off their other calls and join here, but thanks so much for taking some time. We have some super smart folks. I was thinking about it before we hopped on the call, probably more than 30 years of direct Amazon experience and executive leadership on this call. So a lot of goodness here. Starting with Rob Hahn, he's our Chief Operating Officer here at Pattern and the President of Borderless Distribution. And I'll when he joins us and speaks a little bit more, I'll give maybe more of a explanation on his background or let him kind of weigh in. Anyway, we have Trig Jensen. He's the President of Current Influencer Marketing Social Platform that we'll speak to a little bit later as well, but a lot of experience in social marketing, ambassador programs, influencer marketing, all the goodness stuff. So he's a resident expert here, and Pattern did acquire Current, his company, I don't know, probably 5-6 months ago. And so he's now part of the Pattern family. We also have Bryce Warning, who worked at Amazon for a really long time, along with Rob Hahn. He's our Vice President of Business Development, and we'll be sharing some really great insights here, as well as Casey Green, who is our actually now just recently promoted to head of revenue operations. We got to update this slide now, Casey. So Casey spent a long time at Amazon on the 1P retail side as well. And so again, let's just get after it and get into it. The goal here is to walk through some really great tips and ways to rethink your marketplace business heading into 2023 and for the remainder of 2023, I should say. Amazon just reported their Q4 earnings and therefore kind of like their annual earnings, and a lot of really great insights there that have influenced our recommendations on where to focus. A lot of brands we talked to have kind of seen a slowdown. They've seen Amazon slow down on ordering. They've seen increase in shipping costs, a lot of convergence of trends that are leading to these recommendations. So with that, let's get into it. Quick commercial break, I guess. If you're not familiar with Pattern, we are the foremost global marketplace accelerator. And what that means, brands choose to work with us. They sell their inventory to us, we buy it, and then we add a host of value add services and technology on top of that. So we are Amazon's #1 marketplace seller globally. We sell into 60 countries. We operate on a number of different marketplaces around the world, including Tmall, JD, Walmart, eBay, and the list goes on. So we're shipping more than 1.5 million units every single month, and have global just surpassed $1 billion of revenue last year, and have a target of 1.2 billion in global revenue this year. And this 218 trillion, what does that even mean? Just the e-commerce data points. It means that we're handling massive tranches of information second by second. That's keyword phrases. That is scraped data from across multiple marketplaces around the world. And that's just a lot of detailed information on more than 300 million different products. So that is Pattern in a little bit of a nutshell. Before we kind of kick it over back to the panelists here today, wanted to kind of set the stage. Again, we talk to hundreds of brands every single month, and this is a very familiar refrain that we hear. So first of all, if you are an e-commerce or a company that sells anything on e-commerce, generally, we call this the executive dilemma. What we find is that most brands only have a handful of folks dedicated to e-commerce. They might have a lot of agencies, they might have a lot of tech platforms that they tie into, but largely these teams are staffed at less than 5 to 10 people, and oftentimes fewer than five people. But they are tasked with not only doing marketplace e-commerce, they're tasked with the D2C on that far right side, and then they're tasked with doing international. And this just becomes a very complex lift. And I won't go into too much detail, but that is the state of which we're operating. These recommendations that we make, we know someone's got to do them. So we don't take these recommendations lightly. And hopefully the recommendations we make, they're designed not to require a massive list or lift from the brands that implement these strategies. Okay, so last thing before we kind of kick this off, if you have questions for these panelists, you have a lot of smart people in the virtual room here. Feel free to send us a chat or use the Q&A functionality. I see Debbie already sent a note. She doesn't have any sound. Hopefully people are hearing us okay. I don't actually have a good way to test it. I think the panelists can all hear me, but if the guest can't, maybe shoot a text and a Q&A for all of us so that we can see and try to do a little bit of troubleshooting. But I will continue to monitor both the chat and the Q&A and try to answer questions as we go along. We will also have time for questions at the end, so I'll also kind of let that build up. So without further ado, let me introduce the framework through which we'll be chatting through all of these different recommendations today. This is called the e-commerce equation. Very intuitive, very simple. Many of you are already using this equation. And so really quickly, it's revenue equals traffic to your listings or your D2C site or wherever marketplace you're selling on, conversion of that traffic, price, that's kind of like basket size. It's the amount that you convert at, and then certainly availability. And then you just repeat that for customer lifetime value, and you repeat it at scale across multiple marketplaces, which we'll be talking about. So again, without further ado, let's dive into traffic. When we talk about traffic, we're talking about a host of different things. We're talking about referral traffic. We're talking about paid traffic. We're talking about organic traffic, branded traffic, all these different forms of traffic. And we don't have time to go through all of those today because we're going to be covering each of these different vectors of the equation or elements of the equation. But Bryce, tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us a little bit more about traffic.
Yeah, so as John mentioned, I was with Amazon for a number of years in different roles across supply chain logistics, as well as buying and international. And this is an interesting topic because when I started at Amazon in 2013, there was a lot of discussion that at the time, Google, I believe, owns the majority of product research traffic. And that was starting to shift. And so I remember a few years into my tenure at Amazon that it finally went above 50% toward Amazon. But we see now in 2023 projections that 68% in 2023 of product research will start on Amazon. So why does this matter? Well, marketplaces, e-commerce are definitely important, but even more so Amazon specifically is really starting to own that space. People are going to Amazon to look at reviews for specific products, to search in a different product field, whatever they're looking for. And it's starting to become a bigger and bigger portion of the actual product search. I just read that Amazon is now the third largest ad spend group behind Google and Facebook. And I think the latest we have is in Q3 of 2022, Amazon's ads revenue went up by 25% when others were actually declining during those years. So it's a huge deal. We all know about it, but the question is, how do we approach it? And I think what we want to focus on here is, are you using a data-driven approach, and what is your strategy? So on this slide, we'll focus on organic. I'll just read through these quickly, but 80% of all clicks on Amazon happen on the first page of results. There's the joke that where do you bury a dead body, and it's on page 3 of Amazon search results because nobody ever gets there. 60% of the clicks go to the top 3 ranked products, and then 35% of the clicks go to the product that has earned the top spot of the search ranks. Organic is important, but honestly, most of the time when we talk to brands, they only talk about their ad spend. How are they getting to the top with their ad spend? And even more so is, how are they actually going about that? And oftentimes that's a defensive approach where they're actually bidding for ads for their own brand and potentially cannibalizing what they could have gotten organically. Organic is the golden goose, the one that we all go after, but how do you get there? We often hear also that, how do you run your ads? Oh, we got a guy in the back room with a spreadsheet, or we've enlisted an agency or potentially multiple agencies. But do you actually know what they're doing? Do you know the return that you're getting? We know that ROAS is basically broken. It's very difficult to truly understand the return. But if you dig into it, kind of what are you getting out of your ad spend? We use a tool called Destiny. This is proprietary within Pattern. It uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to create strategies for the brands that we work with. Our goal is to use ad spend to position you organically. And once we get there, to move off of that spend and move on to a new area where we could get you organically more and more and more. We call that the ladder. And so you can see on this chart, it might be upfront with specific ad spend. That isn't necessarily going to be, if we use a generic term, if you're an apparel brand, it wouldn't be men's t-shirt. It might be, if you're a higher end, maybe it's a, men's button-up tailored shirt, something that's more of a longer tail where that winnability for your brand is higher. And so you're not spending on specific things that maybe won't get you into an organic slot. But this is how we generally approach it, to shift the spend away from just a defensive constantly on your brand, but to flip that to more of an offensive approach and strategy so that you can grow organically and use that as a strategy to grow the brand, to grow revenue, and not necessarily cannibalize what you could have already been getting.
Yeah, love to see that, Bryce. I think those are such good insights in terms of, and somewhat of a different approach. I think a lot of brands that end up working with us feel like, oh wow, what happens to the ACOS or ROAS paradigm? But generally they're nodding in agreement, like, yeah, I feel like I spend a lot. Amazon says keep spending, but I don't necessarily see this incremental return. And I have this sneaking suspicion that, in order to, juice my ROAS, the agencies that work with me are just cannibalizing existing in terms or driving traffic that is, branded traffic that was already going to convert at some level anyway. And I don't feel that incrementality. So I love that. I did sneak another slide in here just to give a little bit of a preview of how the technology works and the payoff of what Bryce was saying. So high level, this is for Superfeet. This is one of their, child ASINs at a certain size level. But I think this is really, kind of interesting. Even at this level, I'm trying to move some stuff out of the way here, but it's like, you can basically say, okay, we've identified 563 keywords. And I think I took this screenshot several months back. I wouldn't be surprised if this is over several thousand keywords at this point. But at a high level, you can see out of those 563 keywords for this child ASIN, they've got 563 on page one. So this is only showing the page one. And it's basically saying, hey, you've got 80 keywords in the top 4, so we don't really need to cannibalize that organically. You're already winning those, and you can see those ones here, super set carbon insoles. That might be a typo, right? Instead of super feet, super set insoles for men. Maybe that's actually a category description, wide green super feet, etc. But then you can start to see, even on the keyword just insoles, right? They're currently the 11th spot, but they have very high winnability. That is the machine learning in place that's kind of predicting the winnability. And this is patented technology to Pattern that is helping show where we would want to start our bidding and start our, investment into advertising, because these are keywords we ultimately want to win. And as soon as they reach that winning status, the algorithmic bidding software will back off, allow that to stay winning, and go search for, in this case, nearly 500 keywords that you're not winning that you could start to win over time. So I think this is just absolutely phenomenal. So let's keep this moving here. There's obviously on platform capturing the existing demand. Trig, tell us a little bit more about you and your background, and tell us why, you got to figure out a way to bring Amazon or traffic outside of Amazon to be able to win in 2023.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So quick background, I've been doing influencer marketing, social media for almost 12 years. Started my first startup in this space doing like a marketplace for influencers and brands, and sold that one. Then ran a large kind of talent booking business for influencers and large brands, and then started Current. So very familiar with kind of everything from celebrities, kind of booking, all the way down to micro influencers. And that's what we're seeing is kind of the major trend now, is there's huge opportunity for brands to generate new demand. So not people that are already searching for your product, but people that are in your customer cohorts or in your segments that you guys are, as brands, aware of, that you can target through media on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, using user-generated content. So a lot of brands are already deploying the strategy and are using it, but it is really effective sending that traffic to Amazon. And it's a way to get more people looking for those keywords. So if you look at kind of some of the stats that we have around this, if you're using user-generated content, you have multiples higher engagement levels on those ad formats. So that means you're taking a piece of content from an influencer or from a customer, could be even like a customer review type video, and you're using that as the ad. That format is driving way higher view through rates, way higher engagement rate, and way higher ROAS on that content and on that ad format. So it's an amazing strategy to deploy. It's harder, right? Generating new demand is always harder because the audience isn't there, but that's what our team does at Pattern. We can help brands identify those groups of people, get the content, and then start running the right ads traffic to your listings.
Trig, if you're on this webinar right now, you're probably not Gen Z. You might be a millennial, you might be Gen X. You may not even have a TikTok account or a Snapchat account, right? So it's like, what are some of the misconceptions that the brands you talk to today have about these platforms and about the relevancy, especially for B2B brands, or even some of these B2C brands or B2B2C? Like, what are some of the misconceptions and what are some of the results you've seen from people who have truly leaned into the strategy?
Well, I think a lot of people have the misconception that their audience isn't there, right? And I think that's true in some cases, like on TikTok, it's definitely going to skew a little bit younger, but it's not as young as it was yesterday. And it's not as young as it was 6 months ago. So the same like maturing cycle that Instagram and Facebook went through, you see on every platform, right? I think it's just because us old folks take a little longer to adopt things or something, right? And that what that means is typically that the CPMs and the targeting parameters are actually easier to hit if the sooner you do it, right? So the later in the cycle, the platforms get really good at arbitraging all of us and making money and off of our bidding. So the sooner you get involved in these platforms and getting the right creators, from like the better the ROAS is going to be. And so that's one, big misconception. I think the other misconception that I hear a fair bit is like, well, it's like, I don't know if I can create an authentic voice, with my brand, with creators. And that's also like totally doable, no matter what your category is, finding the right story to tell, getting the right people that are authentic, that can speak to your brand. That's what our team does, right? It doesn't mean that we're going to go get LeBron James to endorse your product. If he's the right fit and has the right audience, sure. But really it's about identifying people that are already either passionate about the brand or that would be, have the right content, the right medium for your brand. We're not just going to go contract anyone. So a lot of people think that's how it works though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, awesome insights here. I know we're going to be picking your brain a little bit more once we move down the conversion path, but some fantastic insights. So, okay. And I know we're going on lightning speed here. We could spend a whole webinar, and we actually have, just on traffic or just on conversion. We're trying to provide more of an overview. So moving to conversions, right? There's a lot of what conversion means on a marketplace might be different than, D2C or even, some of these other, smaller marketplaces. But we're talking about from an Amazon standpoint, titles, videos, photos, descriptions, all that sort of stuff. So to kind of set this stage here, I want to bring it back to you, Trig, and talk a little bit before we dive in straight into the marketplaces. Tell us about how, the paradigm of content conversion or traffic conversion differs in the new world, so to speak.
Yeah, well, so I think Bryce was talking about how a lot of people are discovering product on Amazon, and that's typically because they're going there to they've already identified and educated themselves on what they're looking for. And they know that Amazon is the best spot to get to the end of a purchasing decision, or they already have an account on Amazon. They know they can get it in 2 days, right? There's a lot of things that Amazon has done to make that process very simple. But if you think about your own behavior, that education process and kind of the connection with a community or connection with a brand is typically driven from content that we consume. And so that could be video content from a brand, that could be influencer content, that could be off-platform media, right? Like an event or, other trade show type things. There's a million touch points for consumers So what you're trying to do as a brand is be available in all those places where people are learning about your brand. They are understanding what your value proposition is, and you're trying to engage them at that level, and then they make the decision on how they're going to convert. Ultimately, we can try to send traffic to Amazon and try to send traffic D2C, which most brands do, but ultimately the customer is going to make the decision on where they're going to buy and where that's easiest. Those top 3 sections are the most important to be doing at a consistent rate and never to stop doing it. So if you think about like, how does that play out long term? If you're a brand, it's really hard to do that alone, right? It's hard to have a team internally that's going to be creating enough of a volume of content that matches the kind of consumer base that you have. So that's why we recommend all brands use user-generated content for product listings, for advertising, and for your own kind of own social content, because there's no way to scale it without deploying kind of your top customers, influencers, ambassadors. And like I mentioned earlier, that all leads to better ROAS organically as well as on your paid traffic.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I wanted to remind everyone, if you have questions for these fantastic, panelists, feel free to ask them. We do have a couple of open questions, and I think it's probably a great time to just dive into some of these questions and allow you to answer them. So I'm going to read it out loud. You're probably reading it already in the background, Trig. So both of these are related to you, and I think they're both really solid. I've got my own thoughts on some of it, but first off, what impact is TikTok having on share of product search ad spend? Based on press releases and job positions, it appears TikTok is going to launch their own logistics and marketplace sector to bypass Amazon. What does your team think about that?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I think I've got Dustin listening in. He actually just joined our team yesterday from TikTok. He was running their creator marketplace division and really kind of all the Spark ad side to their business, which is a lot of what we're talking about right now as a strategy. So like, absolutely, I think there's a huge shift right now, especially on kind of younger generations, where TikTok is becoming a primary search, not just for products, but for all sorts of topics. So like education topics, how to do things DIY. You're seeing a huge surge in that. And I think Google is aware of that. Other platforms are aware of that. And so kind of TBD on how that all plays out. But I think TikTok is in a very good position to monetize that. And we will try to be ready for any ad formats that they spin out of that type of concept, i.e. kind of keyword targeting, things like that. As it relates to kind of their e-commerce offering, I think if you look at Pattern and Current and where we're going, the goal as a whole company is that we want there to be availability of inventory on anywhere where consumers are. So that's why Pattern is focused on international, focused on other marketplaces. And this TikTok offering will be one of the things that likely we introduce in the near term as an opportunity.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, the interesting thing is TikTok has already, as a marketplace outside of the US, generated more than $1 billion of GMV. So whether or not they implement it in the US or not, like, remains to be seen. But I think if you're trying to read the signs and the tea leaves, yes, absolutely, this will be a thing. Maybe it'll be at a different paradigm versus the search paradigm that Amazon employed. But in terms of, having influencers sell products via this e-commerce experience and then having them fulfilled on the marketplace or off the marketplace, I think is absolutely, it's a really astute question. And maybe it's a good time to bring in, Rob Hahn, and you can introduce yourself a little bit here, Rob. But like, if I don't know how much you know, or you want to weigh in on the whole TikTok as a marketplace and doing their own fulfillment, but you were certainly at Amazon during some very painful years. So maybe you can just opine a little bit, if you don't have specific insights on TikTok, around what is it going to take? I mean, it's easy to say they're going to do logistics, but what does that actually mean? And how hard would that be for TikTok to try to start to level up? I mean, Walmart is years behind where Amazon is, and they're freaking Fortune 1, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this and maybe give a quick intro of your background in this space.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Rob Hahn. I'm Chief Operating Officer, as John said, here at Pattern. I spent 8 years at Amazon. I started as an intern and left as a director of operations, an executive running an Amazon robotics fulfillment center. shifted in the robotic space in 2015, very early on in that journey there. And then I left there at Amazon in 2018 to kind of help launch a company called Whitebox, services around e-commerce in general, both D2C, Amazon, all the other marketplaces as well. And then I shifted in August here to Pattern to take over the COO role and help continue to grow what the foundation of what Pattern had built before I came on board. So yeah, John, I think the reality is that it's super important for a brand to be agnostic to where the sale happens. So I think the basic thing is, if it TikTok, they might build their own market, but it is gut-wrenchingly difficult to build out. It takes billions, not millions of dollars, billions and billions and billions of dollars to build out the network that Amazon has, but they don't necessarily need to build out the network that Amazon has, right? They're solving a slightly different problem, and you're meeting customers a little bit more where they are. They're also more of a tech-forward company than Walmart, which is unshocking to everyone on the call here. So they probably have a leg up, not having actually a large footprint already, getting to look back and see what others, where they've done well, where they've faltered, building on that reduces some of the pain of getting it set up. But I think as a brand, it's another platform, right? I think the reality is that there's continued fracturing within the retail space, and that's not going to slow down. It doesn't get easier from here. So if it's TikTok or whatever the next platform is, we need to be ready for it structurally. And it's one of the most complex and challenging problems that a brand has to face, is getting agnostic with inventory and how we interact with these marketplaces. It's tough.
Yeah, love it. Oh man, we could spend a whole webinar just on this space here. Maybe we should. So, but just keep going. We're at the bottom of the hour or close to it, and want to make sure we get through everything here. Because we're kind of on this space, though, I did want to answer. There have been a handful of other questions, and maybe we can answer some of these remotely as we continue through. But I thought this was a good question, Trig. In terms of, with UGC, is it important to be turning the content into an ad with overlays and CTAs and stuff, or should you just let it run as is, or is it mutually exclusive?
Yeah, really good question. Definitely kind of goes into the tactics side of it. I think in that scenario, we would be running both. So to really break it down, you would have if we're talking TikTok specifically, we would license the content from the creator and run and do overlays and call to actions and test a bunch of different creatives running behind the brand's account. So that's one way we would do it. The other way is actually taking the original post that was shared by the creator, do what's called a spark ad, and run traffic directly behind that piece of content. Those tend to be the highest engaging, but there's some challenges if you didn't brief the influencer, as well as you wanted to, or the content isn't, doesn't have quite the right call to action. But doing both of them is likely what our team would be doing in most cases, in terms of testing kind of both concepts and then driving to the best ROAS. But we're doing that across maybe 30 to 50 pieces of content at any given time. So we're always looking for whatever is relevant in the moment and what's performing the best. And that's what I'd recommend if you're doing it yourself.
Amazing. Trig, you may want to stick your email here, because I can already tell this is a very hot topic. There's a lot of questions here, and I want to encourage folks, maybe to reach out to you if they have additional questions. There are a lot of good ones here. I'm going to ask one more, and if we have time, we'll come back to some of these. I think they're really good. Yeah, I
can type answers in here too, and I'll leave my email in the answer.
Brad. Okay, so at the risk of turning this into a sales pitch for you, how are you planning to differentiate the current platform as a true added benefit for your brands? We have a platform already like this, but unless Current can integrate somehow to Amazon, their Inspire, their social post creation, et cetera, why would they switch over to this?
Yeah, so good question. I think nothing really bad to say about some of our competitors. So I think you have a lot of ways that you could potentially approach this. Our fundamental approach is a whitelisted private CRM. You own your own community. So you're not just throwing an offer into a network. You're really controlling the experience for all of your ambassadors to create long-term relationships and treat them as partners to your brand. So we just approach it very differently. that coupled with our team runs a lot of these programs, meaning you as a brand can tap us for anything that you need. So if you want to contract some influencers, if you want to run media, if you want to do a bunch of product seeding and there's no one else on your team that has bandwidth. So those two things are really our biggest differentiators. And then long-term, the view for us is that we want to be, I think Rob was saying, agnostic to the traffic type and also where the consumer buys. So, and we want to treat influencers that way as well. So if you guys want to run an Amazon campaign and do custom commissions and attribution, great. If you want to run a D2C campaign that's doing discount codes only, great. And in that, we do that already today, but in the future, like we could potentially be doing that with TikTok's marketplace. We could potentially be doing that on Walmart and other avenues. So I think that's where we'll end up differentiating, is being more of an omni-channel true partner to a brand, looking at their entire scope of their business.
Amazing. Okay, well, feel free to answer other questions, bring them up as we go along here. But clearly a lot of interest here. Okay, so this is the off Amazon world of generating traffic, influence, demand, and we think of Amazon really as a place to fulfill demand based on the keywords and keyword phrases. So I wanted to speak a little bit about the importance of improving content and conversion on this. It really ends up being free money. I mean, you can keep the same traffic and increase your conversion by 50, 60, 80%, and that just ends up being free money. So Casey, I wanted to turn it over to you for a second. Maybe you can introduce yourself to the team here and talk a little bit about the evolution of conversion on the marketplace over the years, the time you spent at Amazon.
Yeah, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Casey Green, I spent the last 6 years at Amazon on the first party or vendor central side of their business, where Amazon would buy the inventory, and spent a lot of times with brands or vendors working through how to improve the conversion rates once you get people looking at your products out there. I think the most interesting thing from 2016, when I had started at Amazon, through last year, the big evolution is that, over the last 10 years, people used to buy online through computers. That was the main point. They started to evolve through, phones or other mediums there. And with that, you have less content that you're able to see on your detail pages. Now, the detail pages are very important on what you have on there, but as we mentioned on here, only 20% of the web page is actually being viewed by everyone, while everyone's looking at every one of those images, because those are the big parts that stand out. So maximizing, especially on Amazon, you have up to 6 image spots and then a video piece. Those are crucial to be able to optimize, conversion rates through that. So not only saying, do I have images, but now that fewer people are actually looking at the bullet points, what do my images look like and how do they tell a story? How do they drive improved conversion and get people to actually click the buy button now they've just seen your content?
And I think, so much good content in terms of that mobile optimization. But I think one of the interesting things that we do at Pattern that I would absolutely recommend other brands do if you have the capacity is, we scrape all of the detail pages as well, or can pull in via the API all of the different reviews and try to do sentiment analysis across those reviews to understand what are the most common questions or areas of review that are being highlighted, and how do we bring those to the surface, because we know people won't read through all the bullets, but how do you call stuff out like better sleep? How do you help understand to differentiate between color or size or other types of variations? How do you bring really powerful, emotive, quotes right to the forefront of the listing? That all happens. And I'm sure you saw this a lot, Casey, with different brands that we talked about this beginning. So, brands don't want to show up this way, but they just don't have enough resources and time and, wherewithal and know-how on these marketplaces to truly show up in the meaningful way. But this is what Pandora's Jewelry's listings looked like before we started working with them. And you can see it was just basically a silo shot with, some random kind of gray body in the background with it. I think, and this is a solid product, 288 questions, 700 reviews, but I think if I were to come here, I would think it was probably a fake. It would be hard because I'm so used to the way Pandora shows up in other areas of the retail world. And it's amazing. Their stores are so bright, they're so crisp, they're so clear. You see them in airports, you see them everywhere. And so a lot of the work we did was to implement, soften that, bring in way better content, on the bullet side, but also understanding, a lot of questions about the clasps. How do those work? How many charms does this bracelet hold? And just bringing that right to the forefront of these. And maybe the last thing that we'll just mention here is, Zebra printers is another one. And you think about it on conversion, but you also think about other cost saving areas. In this case, for Zebra, it's about decreasing returns by simply doing a better job of educating the buyer on, direct printing, direct thermal versus thermal transfer. Those are two different types of technology that have different applications that beforehand, customers would order one and then figure out, oh, this is not the one I need, and I'm just going to return it. Well, Rob, what is the impact of, that return process on a brand and its cost structure?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of two pieces. This one is a negative customer experience across the board increases negative reviews, right? So that, forget the cost for a minute. It's a bad experience for a customer because it wasn't evident, and they're far more likely, if they have to return, to also leave a negative review. It's just a massive lift in those two, quite correlated. But from a cost structure, it's expensive to get stuff back. Obviously, it's expensive to then grade it, right? It's one of the most complex and most costly things that happen within a fulfillment center is taking things back, understanding what can I do with it? Can I send it back to Amazon? Do I need to liquidate this? Do I need to fix it? Whatever that might be, is one of the most expensive transactions that happen in any type of fulfillment transaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think once you get, over your skis, so to speak, on content, and you have good content, it's mobile optimized, not to mention all the user generated content that Trig just talked about. There is this crazy dilemma of where do you store it? How do you find it? We don't have a representative from, one of the other brands, the SaaS products we purchased called Amplify. But, Bryce, do you want to tell a little bit about, how this works and how you've seen this either sing or completely fail miserably in your experience with brands that are trying to manage this from an omni-channel perspective?
Yeah, one of the most painful experiences for a brand is uploading new items. I think Amazon specifically, it's 120 different columns, and some columns matter and others don't. And specifically when I was in Australia, we would ask some of the brands for images and content, and they would literally just say, I don't know where that is. So every brand, every company does this in a different way. Sometimes we ask and they say, yeah, it's on a hard drive. Believe it or not, sometimes it's in Dropbox or Google shared folder or something like that. But regardless, you need to find a way to make your content scalable. And this even goes to, if you start using a platform like Current to drive more UGC, then what do you do with it? Is it one and done, or can you reuse that for other strategies that you have across different marketplaces and retailers? And one very smart way to do that is to use a PIM DAM. So if you're not aware of what that is, PIM, product information management, and DAM, data asset management. There are many companies out there. In some cases, we know brands that work with a PIM and a DAM, but then you maybe have to hire a Java team to connect the two, and it can be overly difficult. Amplify does both. And the advantages to this is you get all of your information, all of your content in one place, and then it can be syndicated as well across multiple retailers, multiple marketplaces. And fed in an automated or semi-automated, depending on the retailer, fashion, so that as you do updates, new products, whatever, that can just shoot straight over to that retailer and be updated automatically. These are things that don't always make it to the top of the priority list because it's one of those kind of behind the scenes functions that not all of us realize is very, very painful if done the wrong way. But if done the right way, it can actually really improve your accuracy, your data accuracy, product accuracy across sites, the speed to market, working with multiple retailers. It can really just organize and scale your business. And this is regardless of Amazon versus Walmart versus Target versus Macy's. If you're a brand that's using more than 50, 100 SKUs, you're going to have to find a solution to do this, because it just becomes too much to handle and to organize, and things start to get lost and fall through the cracks. So amplify.io is a brand that it's a company that we acquired. It works very well. We can also talk to other players in the space. There are many. But by and large, we would recommend finding a PIMDAM solution for your brand to just make it easier for you to move fast when needed.
Love it. Okay, so that's number 4. Ensure that your content is scalable. I know it feels like we're going to run out of time. We're going to be fine. So let's just keep moving along. The third kind of element of the equation is price. And when we talk about price, again, that's not just, promo adherence and price suppression and unauthorized or authorized sellers. Speaking of like the content, unauthorized sellers are the worst. They change your content and all of a sudden it's like all this beautiful stuff you had figured out. So part of this is like, how do you get alerted that your content has actually changed since the last time? And you have the ability to kind of action that. That's another innovation coming to the Amplify platform. But, there's also, how do you increase basket size? What sort of bundles should you do, physical and virtual bundles? This is all part of that, world of price. And I'm just going to stay with you for a second, Bryce, because you're over the 5th tip here, I guess, to driving growth. Tell us a little bit about, how this flywheel works here.
Yeah, I'll give you a story behind this. So I worked in the lawn and garden category for quite a few years at Amazon. And one of the things we heard day in and day out from brands we worked with directly was Home Depot's yelling at me because you dropped the price, and I'm supposed to run a promotion on Lowe's next week, but the price you just set it at is below what the promo is. And now they want more funding and the price is going to change. And it was just this constant battle. Amazon has an automated pricing algorithm, and it's very good for customers, but it can often throw off your omni-channel strategy. So Amazon has its flywheel. We kind of have ours. The point in showing this is to just take control of your strategy, not just on Amazon or on Marketplace, but across multiple channels. And what that entails is, first and foremost, you have to have selective distribution. We talked about the 3P sellers that can really throw things off. Many might think that there's not a way to deal with that. There is. There are things you can put in place to make it so that you can kind of kick off those bad apples. And what that does by having selective distribution, either direct with Amazon or with a partner like Pattern, you can then work toward price stability online. So MAP compliance is one of the bullet points on the last slide. If you're able to get that stability on Marketplace and keep that consistent with your brick and mortar retailers and other partners that you have, it makes your life a lot easier. You can run promo strategies, different things, and they're not going to be knocking on your door on a day in, day out basis. That also provides then more leverage with those retailers. You responding to them flips to then, them coming to you for different things. I've mentioned the better brick and mortar performance. So that's like that control side. What we use that for is then how do you grow? Well, if there's multiple 3P sellers, if the pricing isn't stable, if you're losing the buy box for whatever reason, you actually then can't go after the ads for those products. So first and foremost, you need to own that buy box so that you even can have control to be able to do things, even from an ad spend perspective. So buy box ownership by you or an authorized seller, that then goes to the improved ad consistency and performance, and then concentrated investment, just like I said, SEO, content, customer service, and that provides the growth. So we talk a lot internally about the price erosion funnel, and we work to reverse that. But all of these pieces, which largely stems from selective distribution and cleaning up that channel, can really enhance your ability to control and grow your brand, not only on Amazon or marketplaces, but then also in brick and mortar and across the different channels, or even across different regions that you might be working in.
Love it. Okay, so you get the traffic lever going, you get the conversion. You got to make sure that you've got control of your distribution and of your pricing. And this one may be the thing we should be focusing on first, because you can do all that stuff, and if you're not available, you're not going to sell anything. So Rob, tell us a little bit about this portion of the e-commerce equation and how it starts to, what you've seen work and just be an unmitigated disaster on your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key here, and inventory management is always kind of the unsexiest of things, right? Like logistics, like most brands want to talk about selling things, but Johnny said it really well, right? Like the precursor to actually having that sale, you can do everything else perfectly. But if I can't hit the buy now button or the add to the cart button, it doesn't matter. Like all of your other stuff falls to the wayside. So inventory management's actually, although unsexy, super critical for a brand. It's not just on Amazon, but the way you think about inventory management across, it's a very simple thing. You got to be in stock, but it's even more than that. And John, if I can actually ask you, can you go back to that Pandora slide actually really quick? I noticed something on here on the very right side. Speed is something that is important. So like just to go in a little detail, just like peel back a layer, it's not just about being in stock. It's about having the right stock levels, which is extraordinarily complex. And we use a lot of modeling to help us do, but a brand has to struggle with this. So if you take a look, if you go back one more real quick, John, on the right side, you're going to see delivery speeds. So you see this free shipping, you see get it over this date range, you get it by Tuesday, May 14th. I guarantee you that every person who's purchased on Amazon here has not bought something on Amazon before because they didn't get it in time. The next slide, you're going to see something really important. You're going to see arrives before Christmas with a specific date, and that date tells me a couple things, right? I have the right stock and it's in the right place. You have more control over that than you may think if you do it really well on Amazon. That is not just on Amazon, that's across the board in other marketplaces. You can go back to the slide now, John, but I want to highlight that inventory management, that is a manifestation of the complexity that you are going to have to chase down within inventory management. You got to make sure you got the right stock in the right places. But more importantly, I talked about it earlier, the agnosticism that you can have around where a thing sells is powerful. So keeping that inventory as close as you can within one network. I guarantee you that some people on here have seen or been around inventory being split for 4 different reasons in 10 different warehouses. And the problem is you got to be right the first time. If I split my Amazon inventory here and my Walmart inventory here, and I'm wrong about those sales velocities, then that puts me in a tough position where I either lose sales, increase costs, or both. In order to solve this problem, you got to be data obsessed. You got to just worry about learning everything you possibly can with the data that's available to you. And it's complex data. It's a challenging problem to solve. And a lot of brands struggle to understand what are the mechanisms in order to capture that data, get insights from that data, and then what actions are required. But it's important. It's foundational. And one of the reasons it's so critically important and very challenging is the next 2 slides are really just to show you the complexity between some of the different marketplaces that you have to interact with. The shipping speeds are different, the locations, how you do it, the return options, all the different options you have available to you, ranging from seller fulfilled on each one of these platforms. What are the costs for all the different sizes of different items, right? So it's not even just about inventory management, how much you send in. It's about what's the right fulfillment method. Do you stay 1P or 3P on these specific items because of the costs associated with 3P fees on each transaction type? There's a lot of complexity here, and it's not getting easier. It's only accelerating. The complexity here is something that brands have to get their brains around. And if they wait until it becomes simpler, it means somebody else has figured it out. It's a really important thing to figure out early on. And it's also, those brands that do it well have incredible cost controls. And it's a massive catalyst for growth because they know where they can invest and grow sustainably. So I think that that's the main focus is on inventory management, how it really is a precursor to anything else you're going to do.
Love it. So man, there's so much expertise. Again, we can do a full webinar just on fulfillment, logistics, availability, all these other pieces. Hopefully this gives you a quick snapshot. I will mention this probably at the end, but Pattern is hosting its second Accelerate conference in May 10th and 11th. And there will be folks from Amazon there, from Shopify, from Alibaba. There will be tracks on logistics, on technology, on brand experience, on social selling. So it's in Salt Lake City, Utah. You can go to accelerationsummit.com and go buy a ticket. But if these are topics that are interesting to you, I would absolutely recommend. This is not a sales pitch from Pattern. We hardly even, you don't even see Pattern's logo, but it's bringing together the brightest minds and brands that are trying to solve these big problems globally into one space. And it's just phenomenal. Michael Phelps will be speaking there. We'll have a ton of other massive speakers, Neil Patel on the SEO front. So feel free to take a look at that, and we'd love to have you there. So moving right along, that is the e-commerce equation. Once you get it dialed, then it's like, okay, I got it on Amazon, or at least Amazon US. Oh my gosh, I've got Amazon Canada, I've got Italy, I've got the UK, I've got Turkey, I've got Australia, and plus all of the other Asia marketplaces, Lazada, Tmall, JD.com. So Casey, I wanted to have you give us a little bit of a perspective on the Amazon world versus everything else that you might be selling your product on.
Yeah, if you're optimizing for growth year in and year out, it makes total sense to say, all right, am I dominating here domestically where I'm starting? But then what else is out there? What other marketplaces are there? And there's hundreds of them globally. This is kind of our fun e-com solar system, which points out some of the key international marketplaces. But Amazon globally, you look at the size of Amazon globally there, but what's dwarfing that? Alibaba. You know, you're talking the Tmalls, the Taobaos, all under this Alibaba umbrella. And then you've got JD.com over in APAC as well, that's, you know, on track to actually eclipse Amazon. So you think of just the sheer size over in Asia Pacific marketplace. If you're not in there, are you thinking about it? What are you looking at? You've got some of the other domestic marketplaces here, but there's also growing markets in South Korea and Japan are booming e-commerce global marketplaces. When you look across the different global e-commerce marketplaces, though, where I like to start first is to say, what's the ease of implementation in some of these different marketplaces? We've tried to put a little bit of a heat map up here for you, looking at the greens to yellows to reds, going from easy to maybe hardest. If you're in the US operating on an Amazon marketplace, it's relatively easy to then start and say, I'm going to go internationally across Amazon. Amazon Canada drives most of the marketplace in Canada. UK and Germany are the same pieces. I think those two drive somewhere around 80% of all the European e-commerce marketplace across Amazon, across those two countries. So just to start there. Or if you're looking at the UAE, you can actually port over your ratings and reviews from Amazon US into the UAE marketplace, so you get this big boost on ratings and reviews right off the gate. So a lot of ways to say, what am I doing here domestically? If I'm doing that on Amazon, maybe look at some of these other marketplaces that I can do this in English first. And then you start looking at the massive markets in China or Japan, and they do business a little bit differently in those marketplaces. So you have to understand, you know, in China, they want to be a lot more interactive. They're not just looking at your images. But can I build something there internationally over in China to be able to interact with customers back and forth? So as you look globally, try to understand what are the size of the prize. We've put some estimates here in GMV, and then what's the ease of implementation and how can I make my dollars work for me?
Love it. Well, we just got a few minutes left, Casey. Why don't you bring us home in terms of, okay, I've got all these levers, I've got the equation, now I've got the map of kind of Dakota ring of where to go. Outside of even this, like, you know, roadmap of going global, let's just focus on number 8. Tell us a little bit more about how you should bring it home.
Yeah, it's interesting when brands look at their costs. Most every brand I've spoken to over the past year while at Pattern has struggled to understand all the costs that go into either their 1P or their 3P marketplace cost. And the goal for you, especially if you're on 1P now going through AVN or 3P planning out your year, you want to optimize your profits and make your dollars work for you. The key to that is understanding where your dollars are being spent. So just high level here, talk through a couple of these pieces. Is the wholesale price is what everyone understands and knows. That's a PPM in an Amazon language. But not everyone takes into account all the accruals or the off invoice costs. Those can be damages and freight allowances or marketing or even your promotional funding. So ensuring when you're looking at, hey, what are my true costs? It's not just my wholesale, but what else is coming off future purchase orders. And then Rob touched on maybe the most the largest cost of all of these, which ends up being operational costs. So understanding how are you doing with full truckloads or pallets or shipping in direct imports versus direct fulfillment. And I think from my time at Amazon, the largest complaint I had from vendors was saying, I have chargebacks and shortage claims that I just need to continue to pay over and over, which I never build into my budgets. So building some of those in there are critical as you think through this. The last piece, John, I just want to hit on are kind of this bottom layer here, which is your off P&L resource costs. A lot of that goes into your agencies, whether it's ad agencies or content or compliance agencies, and then data providers or resources. And then to what Bryce had mentioned earlier, I think all of these different costs come at driving your price points to where you're at, which can affect your offline, your brick and mortar prices, and then have other companies coming at you saying, hey, I need you to fund other pieces there as well. So understanding all the costs that go into this are going to be critical for you to say, what are the best options for me? Is it 1P? Is it 3P? Is it brick and mortar, D2C? But having an understanding of those allows you to be long-term effective on making the right cost-effective decisions.